Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and today I want to show you how to bead weave your own toggle clasp. We've used two different stitches. We've done a brick stitch and a peyote stitch, and we're going to make the actual round part of the toggle clasp. To begin with, you're going to want to gather your materials. I have a quick link right here, which is a nice solid ring. This is size 20 millimeters. I have three different types of seed beads. I have two size 11-0. I have a Toho and then I have a Miyuki, and they're in two different colors. And then I also have a size 15-0 Miyuki. You can use whatever beads you want. It's just important that you have two of the same size and then one of a smaller size. I have some beading thread, which I've already cut myself a length, which is about 4.5 feet long, and I've conditioned my thread. And then I have a beading needle, size 12-0, a pair of scissors, and a very handy thread zapper. To begin, you're going to want to go ahead, condition your thread, and thread your needle onto it. I don't have a bead stopper placed at the other end. You can see it's just the length of thread. And to start, we're going to put the thread into the inside of the loop, pull it through until you have about a length of about 6 to 8 inches coming through the other side. And we are going to tie a surgeon's knot. And the way you do that is you go under and pull tight. And then you're going to do the same process. You're going to go take the top thread, go under the bottom one, and then under again, and pull tight, and pull that snug. Since my darker color is going to be my interior round, I'm going to pour out some of my size 11-0 Tohos, and onto my needle, I'm going to take two of them, pull those all the way down until they reach your quick link, and then go behind the link, pull your thread through, keep your beads on top of the link, and pass your needle through the second bead you strung onto your thread, and then pull your thread through. Can you see what I did right there? And you'll see that the actual band of the thread is going across and under the bottom of the quick link. So this time we're just going to take one bead, pull it all the way down. We want it to rest on top of that quick link, and we're going to get it to do that by pulling your thread through the middle of the quick link. And then you're going to go back up through that same bead you just strung. And then you just pull it tight so it nestles close up to your other beads. Do that one more time. Pull a bead down. Pull your needle through the middle of the quick link. You want your bead to stay on that side. Pass your needle back through the bead you just strung. Pull tight and make sure it scoots up along the edge. And now you're going to keep doing that until you complete your entire round using the size 11-0 beads, and in my case they're in purple. I finished beading around my quick link for this first round of the dark purple beads, and I'm ready to add my last bead. I've got this tail of thread here. I'm just going to grasp it in my other hand. I eventually want to weave that back into my beadwork to secure it, but for right now I just want to keep it out of the way. I'm going to add one last bead. Follow the same process. Pull your needle through the middle of that quick link, back up through the bead that you just strung, pull that secure. Now I want to go through the top of that first bead I strung in the row, pull my thread and needle through the middle of the quick link, and then out the other side, and then back up through that original bead again. So I have a solid round. Now to go up to the next row, I'm going to take two beads, again size 11-0, but of my second color. Pull those down. Now I'm going to pass through the first bridge of thread which was connecting. So there's a bridge of thread between all my beads on this first row. So the first bridge of thread, I'm going to pass my needle under, pull it through, and now up through the second bead I strung on that second row and pull. Now I'm going to pick up one bead and now I'm going to go under the second bridge of thread, pull through, and back up through that bead I just strung. And in doing this, I'm actually creating nice bridges of thread on the second row as well that I'll be able to use for my third row. You're going to do that all the way around until you get to the point where you started again. I've stitched a few more beads along my second row, and I want to show you a design choice you get to make at this point before progressing any further. If you were to stitch one of the size 11/0 bead per bridge of thread between the other beads, you're going to get these gaps between your beads. And they're uniform, so this is definitely a design choice. You can have it look like that. Or as you'll see in the finished example here, there's not so much space between each bead. Now if you'd prefer to have the beads tighter together like I do in the sample piece and not have these gaps, what you're going to want to do is you're going to go ahead, pick up your bead as usual, pull it down, and then instead of automatically choosing to go between the next bridge of thread, you might end up going between the same bridge of thread you did on the previous bead. And that's going to be dependent upon how tightly together your beads are. So in some cases, you'll have 2 beads per bridge of thread, and in some cases, you'll just have 1. So like on this one, I'm going to move over to the next thread, bridge, pull it through, back up through the bead I just strung, and now, actually, I think on that one, just the way that they're sitting, I'm going to actually go ahead and go anyways to the next bridge of thread. I'm not going to go back through that same one again. But knowing how this works, chances are probably pretty good that with this current bridge of thread, I am going to go through it again. And remember, when I say bridge of thread, I'm talking about the top line of thread right here that connects the beads on your first row. Let me show you that one more time. So I want to go through that same bridge of thread, and back up. All right, and I think now you can see the difference. So here's where I was going 1 second row bead through each row, each bridge of thread, and then here I was making a decision if it was 1 or 2 beads per bridge of thread, and I'm just scooting my beads tightly together. I'm just making sure they line up. So it's a design choice you get to make. Once you've decided, you'll go ahead and bead the entire second row, and I'm going to actually take out these beads that I've done right here, and I'm going to go ahead and bead them all so that they're tightly together. So when we're done with that whole second row, we'll go ahead and progress on to the third, which is actually a decorative edge. I finished beading my second row, and all I have to do is add my last bead. I'm going to do that the same way I've added all the other ones. Just pick up the bead, go under the bridge, and back through the bead that you just strung and pull tight. Now I want to take my thread and go through the first bead that I strung in the second row. So I'm creating that bridge between the two. I'm going to go back up through the last bead I strung and pull. So that row is now complete. Now I need to add the third row, which is a decorative edge, and you'll see that here. And to do so, I've pulled a smaller size bead. I have size 15/0 here. And we're going to do this row differently. We're going to pick up one bead, and we're going to go under the nearest thread bridge on the second row and pull snug. We're going to pick up another of the size 15/0 bead, and we're going to find the next bridge of thread, go under it, pull through, and make sure all your beads sit right just by manipulating them. Now, whereas in the second row we decided if we wanted to put 1 or 2 beads per bridge of thread, for this third and final row we're going to keep at 1 bead per bridge of thread. So this row actually goes a bit quicker, and you're just making that nice edge. And you're going to do that all the way around. I've beaded the third row, which is going to be the exterior row with its decorative edge, and I'm ready to add my last bead. I'll add it the same way I've added all the others. Just pick it up, go under the last bridge of thread, pull through. So now we have 3 complete rows, and what's left to do on this part of the toggle is to add our bail. So we've done brick stitch around the quick link, and now for the bail we're actually going to do flat peyote stitch. And you can see that it looks like it gets larger, and that's because we start with a size 15-0 and then we graduate up to the size 11-0. So the actual decorative edge is going to be the first row of your peyote stitch. So go ahead, you've pulled your thread through, you've finished your row, go down through a bead in the second row and pull through. I just want this row a little bit more secure before I start adding more beads. So now I want to just go up through another bead in the second row and come out the top side. Just going to give me a little bit more to work with. So I'm going to go through one of my 15-0 beads, which is already secured, and I'm going to add another size 15-0 bead, and then I'm going to go through the bead which is next to it, again on that outer edge, and pull snug until it fits side by side. I'm going to add another bead and go through the 15-0 bead next to the one I just came out of. So I'm filling in that gap and I'm pulling. So I'm going to add what is a third bead to my outside decorative edge, which will mean I'll have a row of 7 beads, which are all connected, touching each other. So now I'm going to start my peyote stitch by adding another size 15-0 bead and going back through what was the third bead I added to the exterior edge. Pick up another size 15-0, skip over the bead which was the actual edge, and go through what was the second bead you added. Pull tight, pick up another bead, skip over the one which was actually on the edge originally again, and go through the first bead you added. So I'm going to pick up another bead, and you can see where we've got these nice, almost like teeth going here. So we're going to go through this one here, come out, pull snug, and you see how those are starting to stack? So we're going to do a total of 5 rows of the size 15-0. So you can see we're counting the first row as the one which was part of our decorative edge. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 1 more to go. When you've completed that, what you're going to want to do is we're going to just continue on, but we're going to change the bead that we're using. And we're going to go ahead and go to our size 11-0, and it's going to be in the color that we use for our second row around the quick link. So we're going to do the same exact process, just with a different bead. You don't need to change any of your pattern. And this time we're going to do 3 rows. So that's 1 row, which we just did. That's what we got so far. Now we're going to add 5 rows of the first color we did, which is size 11-0 again. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to that second color that we used, and we're going to do 3 more rows of it. Again, not changing the stitch pattern at all, just using different colors and sizes of beads. We've got 3 rows now of that second color, so now we're going to add 5 more rows of the silver, which was a smaller size 15-0. All right, we are all done with that part. You can see what we've got now. So we've got 5 rows, 3, 5, 3, 5. Go ahead, fold your beadwork in half so that your 2 ends meet. So this is where you started. Now you've got your end piece. Line up the edges so that they're flush together. And we are just going to sew your bail together. So I'm going through the outer edge because my thread is coming out the edge here. I'm going to go through the bead, which is along the decorative edge here on the outside. Go through it. Go now through the second bead. This is again on your edge that you folded over. Pull it. Go down through another bead in your decorative edge. I actually skipped over one, and now I'm going through the second one, or what would be, I guess, the third one from the edge. Go back into your beadwork. That's along the edge you folded over. So you're doing every other one on the bottom edge, you're doing every other one on the top edge. It can be a little tricky to see in the video, but it'll make sense once you look at it. Back through one along the outer decorative edge. And I'm going to take my thread, which is right here. I've got one more. I'm going to go now back through. So this here, I could get my needle under here so you can see, this was the edge that I folded over. I'm going to go back through that edge and all 3 beads along that last row, that 5th row. And pull. And now your bail is secure on there. You have a nice bail which looks good on both sides. And now what you'll do with this end here and this end here is you'll tie off your thread and you'll incorporate both back into your bead weaving. So you'll go ahead and you'll rethread your needle onto this tail, tie it off, and rework it back into your bead weaving. Same with this edge as well. And we actually have another video on Beadaholique as to how to do that. And then you'll be done with half of your toggle clasp. Now we have to make the toggle bar. And to do this, what you're going to want to do is cut and condition 3 feet of beading thread and thread a needle onto it. And for this one, we're going to need a bead stop. So just any bead you have around that's a different color than the beads you're working with. Thread that on and go ahead, scoot it down to the bottom until you have about 8 inches. And just secure it by simply tying the thread around it once. You don't want to tie a knot because you're going to want to be able to remove it. And this is just going to hold your beads in place. Now for the actual bar itself, we're going to do flat, even count peyote stitch. We do have another video on Beadaholique showing how to do this, but I'm going to quickly show as well. We're going to want to place onto our needle 16 of our size 11-0 of the deep color purple, which was the color we used on the interior of our round. Once you've got those on your needle, scoot them all the way down till they're right up against the bead stop. And now we're going to go ahead and make our second row. So the first bead is a little hard to tell when you're using all the same color. So if you do want to check out that other video, it uses contrasting colors, which is a little easier to see how to do the stitch itself if you're not familiar. So we've beaded on another of the same color bead. Here was my 16th bead. I'm going to skip over that bead and I'm going to go into the bead next to it. Because the bead I just strung on is going to be the first bead in my next row. You can see how that's stacked up against itself right there. Got 2 stacked together, and that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to have to manipulate them a little bit in the first couple rows here. The tension can be a little bit wonky, but once you do more stitching, it'll even out. You're just going to go ahead and help it along as you go, and I'll show you that in a minute. Skip over 1 bead and go into the bead next to it. And pull. And we're going to do that all the way along the edge until we reach the end. So I picked up 1 more bead, skipping over a bead, going into a bead next to it. All right, when you get to the end, you should have something that looks like this. And you can see it's kind of curving and the tension's a little bit off. Just try to help it along as much as you can just by using your fingers. I'm pulling the thread tighter here. And now we're going to create another row. So what we're going to do is the same thing as we did before. Just place one bead onto your needle. And now we're going to go up and go through here. You can actually see little gaps, and that's where we're going to go ahead and place our beads. So go through that bead which is protruding upwards. And then you'll see that the tension's a little off here. You can help that by just pulling on the side bead. And there you go. So now another bead. And do check out the other video we have, which does have the contrasting colors and the little bit larger beads if you need a little help with this stitch. Okay, and we're just going to keep this same process. So one bead, skip over a bead, go to the bead which is standing a little bit up. And you'll see that as you do more, it starts to straighten out, the rows become more even, and you're just going to keep doing this process, and what you need to do is you need to create 12 rows. So we're on our third row, and you'll just keep doing the same stitch back and forth until you've done 12 rows. Once you've finished your 12 rows, your bead weaving should look like this. You've got your flat, even count peyote with the bead stop still on the end, and now we're going to zip it up. And the way you can tell that this is going to zip up okay, and when I say zip up, I mean we're going to bring the two sides together and form a tube. And it's going to come together, you can tell, because there's an indent here. If you follow that column, this part protrudes, and those two sides are going to come together and fit nicely. So what you want to do is you actually want to fold your beadwork, and you want to go now up through this bead. So it might be easier to see if I show you like this to begin with. So I've just arched my thread all the way from there to there, from the start point to the end point. And now I'm going to pull it together. And now I want to go through this bead here. So all the beads that are protruding out, I want to stitch through. And then go to the next side. And you're literally zipping this up like the teeth of a zipper. And I find it easiest to do 2 beads at once. So I take my needle and I go at a diagonal. I'm making sure my tension's holding well. And then I go back here. 2 more beads. And they're the ones that are sticking out more. And then what you're going to do is when you get to the end, you're going to come through that last bead, and then you're going to want to go right under the bead stopper, down through that very first bead. And then I like to go next to a couple beads next to it. And there you go. You've got the bar part, and we're going to do the decorative edge to the bar separately. So what you want to do at this point is you want to go ahead, tie off your thread, and weave it back into your bead weaving, and also remove the bead stop, tie off your thread, and weave part of the tail back into the bead weaving, and then we're going to rethread our thread and do the decorative edge. I started a new thread and I incorporated it into my beadwork, and I ended with the thread coming out of one of the top beads. Now, if you did have enough thread from when you were doing this original stitching and you wanted to go ahead and just not tie off your thread and start a new one, you could. I liked having this structure sound and done and complete and starting a new thread for the top parts, but that's totally up to you. So place 1 bead onto your needle. Again, this is another one that's a size 11-0, and it's just my other color from the other half of my toggle clasp. And we've got these bridges of thread along the top sides as well, just like we did when we made the other half of the toggle clasp. And so what I'm going to do is, coming from the back, which is the interior of my circle here, of my tube, I'm going to place my needle under that first bridge of thread, which is next to the bead that I came out of. and pull. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick up another bead, go under the next bridge of thread, and pull. This is very much like whip stitching and sewing, if you're familiar with that. And I'm just going to do this all the way along the edge. Last one. Okay, so you can see I've got a round, but I want these to be even more of a round shape. So I'm actually going to go through the actual hole of the beads I just strung and connect them all together. Just going to go all the way around. And I'm going to go back through the first one again as well. Now I'm just going to pull my thread together, and that's going to pull those beads towards the center. I'm going to thread onto my needle one more of my original purple size 11/0 bead. And I want this one to end up in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead, arch over, and go through a bead on the opposite side. And when you pull that, that one's going to end up in the middle. And now I'm actually just going to go through some of my beadwork as part of the round cylinder, the round tube, just to help to secure that. After I've gone through a couple beads, you always want to follow your bead path. I'm going to put my needle in so it comes out the middle of the tube on the other side. That's nice and secure. And now I want to make sure that this needle actually comes out through one of the actual holes. So I'm just going to stick my needle through the side and come out on top. And now I'm going to do the same thing for this side as I did for the other side. And then I'll tie off my thread. Now that our actual toggle bar is done, we need to have a way to actually attach the toggle bar to the necklace, which is going to be with the bail. And so basically the same principle we did with the other half of our clasp. We're going to follow that exact same guideline, but we're going to start the flat peyote stitch on an individual thread, whereas with this one we actually integrated it into the beadwork itself from the weaving we were already doing. And so to begin, we're going to do the same process that we did to begin the actual bar. We're going to go ahead, put our bead stop on. So to start, we're going to take our size 15/0 bead and we're going to place 4 of them onto our needle. And we are just going to start peyote stitching this. So that is our first row. We have 4. Go ahead, place another bead onto your needle, skip over that other first bead. That other, I guess it's not the first bead, but it's that last bead of that row. Skip over a bead, and then now you are actually going through the first bead you strung. So now we've got our second row. To make the third, string on a bead, skip over that last bead of that row that we just did, skip over a bead, and go through a bead. All right, so we got 3 rows. So what you're going to want to do to make the bail part is you're going to want to go ahead and stitch 7 rows of the smallest size bead, which for me it's the silver, which is the size 15/0. Then you're going to want to do 5 rows of your size 11/0 or whatever the middle bead is that you've got in the other half of your toggle clasp. Then you're going to want to do 7 rows of the darkest color, which is the same color you used for the actual bar. And again, it's going to be a size 11/0. Then another 5 rows of the other size 11/0 bead or whatever size you're using. And then another 7 rows of the 15/0, which is the silver. After you've stitched all your rows, it should look like this, which is very similar to what it looked like here for the other half of your toggle clasp. And now I want you to stitch one more row of the smallest size bead. So you've stitched one more row. And now what I want you to do is actually take your needle off of your thread. And we're going to do a little something that's going to make life a little less frustrating in a few minutes. So we're going to take off our bead stop. I actually find it's easiest just to go ahead, put my needle through it, slide it all the way off. I am going to rethread my needle onto here. And I'm going to tie off my thread and incorporate it back. There are videos showing how to do this. I'll just do it really quick right here. Following my bead line, my stitching, so I don't have any threads that show. Take my thread zapper. I'm just going to get rid of this thread right here. All right, now it's going to be a lot easier to zip this up with that bead stopper gone. So go back, rethread your needle. Now we're just going to zip this up the same way we zipped up our other piece. Okay, so remember, like the teeth of a zipper, think of it that way, and you zip up a zipper, you're zipping up your bead weaving. Go through. So I've got that arch again. You see when I pull this through? And now just pull it together in half. Go through the next protruding bead. Go back to the other side, the other one. And finally the other side. And look, now everything is flush. And now if you actually wanted to make a ring, making peyote stitch, you would actually follow this exact same pattern that you just did for this little bail. You just add more beads and then you would have a ring. A little tip there if that's something you're interested in making. All right, I'm going to go through a couple beads because I just want to make sure that this is very secure. Again, I'm following my stitching pattern because I don't want any threads to show. And I wanted to exit on one end. I don't want to exit in the middle. Okay, so I've got this, it's folded in half. And now I just need to attach it to my bar. To attach your bail to your toggle bar, you're basically just going to sew it onto your bar using the beads. So we figure out where the center is, eyeball a bead you're going to want to go through. For me, it's going to be this one right here. But I don't want to go through it in this direction because then my bail is going to end up on this side. So I want to go through it in the other direction. I'm going to take my needle out, still eyeballing where the bead is and which bead it is. I'm going to go through it. I want to go through some other beads until I can get my needle back into the direction I want it to be going in. So then I want to come back through the beads till I get to my bail again. And I want to start beading into my bail. So I want to actually go ahead, put my needle through the bail. And then also through a bead as part of the toggle bar. You might need to move around your positioning of your hands. You're basically just going to try to find a way to stitch this on. So I'm going to actually go through another bead. Then I want to go through again my bail. And then I want to go through another bead as part of the toggle bar. going to go through my bale again. And I can tell that's starting to really get nice and firm. I want it a little firmer though. And you're just going to keep doing this until you feel like that is nice and tight and a good bond. When you do some integrating of your thread back into your beadwork. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. That's nice and strong. And you are done. So you'll just go ahead and you'll tie off that thread, and you've created a toggle bar to match your bead weaving projects.